Fans all throughout the world were horrified by a single 1956 snapshot. Once 300 pounds of comic gold, Oliver Hardy now appeared to be a shadow of his former self. No one was aware that he had shed over 100 pounds, no one knew how ill he really was. The company continued to promote his flicks while keeping it a secret. There was a man struggling for his life behind that well-known mustache and tie twiddling. What Hollywood attempted to conceal about the adored star's last days is now exposed by this unique photo. On January 18, 1892, Oliver Hardy was born in a small Georgian village. Only 10 months after Oliver was born, his father passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. Despite having survived one of the deadliest battles of the Civil War, his mother was already raising children from a previous marriage, so Oliver never really got to know him. Was left in charge of running boarding homes around Georgia in order to support the family. Oliver grew up witnessing his mother's struggle to make ends meet as they were constantly on the road. He was never free of that early instability. Oliver had a unique quality even as a little youngster. He began singing as a boy soprano throughout the South at the age of 8. He truly had a talent for music. Oliver wasn't the kind to sit in a classroom, so his mother sent him to a renowned voice coach in Atlanta to practice. He sang at theaters for $3.50 a week, which was a respectable sum in those days, and missed classes. In order to join a touring performance, he even skipped away from school. He always had the courage and the want to perform on stage, and it never went away. He never felt at home at school. After being disciplined in a military school, he was transferred to a college in the highlands of Georgia. However, he had little interest in studying. Local theater was his preference. Attempting to perform at any risk, he started studying law at the University of Georgia when he was 20 years old. Not because he was a bookworm though. All he wanted to do was play football. He most likely never opened a textbook, but he never missed a game. Nevertheless, the self-assurance he acquired on that field accompanied him throughout his life. Oliver was doing everything from cleaning to operating the projector in a small village theater by 1910. But he became enraged after spending so much time watching movies. He began to think he could do better than the characters on film. He so relocated to Jacksonville, Florida, which at the time had more than 30 movie studios. In 1913, it was the South's version of Hollywood. He was employed at a movie studio throughout the day. At honor of his 300-pound physique, he performed at clubs at night as the Ton of Jollity. Madeline Soloshin, a pianist he met, earned 7 times as much as he did. Despite his mother's disapproval, they were married the same year. Oliver debuted in a short film titled Outwitting Dad in 1914. Credited with Hardy was usually portrayed as the villain due to his size. He was 6 feet 1 inch and about 300 pounds. He had made 50 appearances in short films by 1915. He frequently portrayed the villain pursuing the slender hero. However, he learned how to graduate from those early comical parts, tumble and make a comedic use of his face. He was even hired to mimic a fellow actor who was already mimicking the sidekick of Charlie Chaplin. It paid the bills, even if it was ridiculous. Oliver briefly worked as a director, directing 10 pictures between 1916 and 1917. He also acted in each of them. He learned how to timing every motion, how to look at the audience, and how to construct a comedy throughout his brief tenure as a director. He also found that the studio's owners were embezzling money from the payroll, exposing corruption there. He continued to work even after the company's demise. He just relocated to another studio and continued working. Oliver and Madeline had a happy beginning to their marriage. They even kept a dog and a monkey as pets and performed in the same locations. However, all changed in 1917 when they relocated to Los Angeles. His career flourished. His curiosity in other women also increased. He had been sued by Madeline by 1919. He frequently failed to make his support payments, which were $30 per week. She went to see her father when he became unwell, vowed to make things right. He then informed her via telegraph that he would not be bringing her back, and that was all. During World War I, Hardy attempted to join the army, but recruiters made fun of his stature, but he continued to labor. Something happened on film in 1921 that would go down in history, but was not given much notice at the time. On December 1st, the silent comedy short The Lucky Dog was released. A young guy called Stan Laurel portrayed a homeless vagrant who was expelled from his house in it. They become pals after he finds a stray dog. Another guy called Oliver Hardy appears in the same movie as a bumbling criminal. He makes an attempt at robbery, then conspires with a jealous boyfriend to use explosives to blow up Laurel. However, the tiny dog saves him, thus the plot fails. The twist is that it sounds like simply another old comedy short. This was Laurel and Hardy's first on-screen appearance together. They would go on to become one of the greatest comedic duos ever, but no one knew it yet. They weren't even pals at the time. They were only two men doing separate parts in the same movie. Laurel was energetic and crazy. Hardy had a stern, intimidating appearance. The realization of their potential as a team would not come for almost 7 more years. Hardy was already making a reputation for himself when that one short picture languished on stores for 2 years before it was released. He performed in more than 40 silent pictures for Vitagraph Studios between 1918 and 1923. He was the villain most of the time. Larry Seaman, a comic who enjoyed outrageous pranks, explosions, and untidy mayhem, was his companion at the time. They made costly, action-packed movies that usually ended in devastation. To appear meaner, Hardy frequently donned artificial mustaches and heavy eyebrows. However, his personal life was collapsing as his business was expanding. Hardy married Myrtle Reeves in November 1921, a week after divorcing his first wife. They had very little in common, notwithstanding the fact that she was an actor. He worked long hours and went to casinos and racetracks in his spare time. She remained at home. She was drinking excessively by 1926. She kept escaping to drink despite Hardy's best efforts to help, including placing her in a sanitarium for treatment. She once disappeared with $35,000 in cash for 6 weeks. Hardy claimed to have looked everywhere for her. Perhaps they broke up and then reconnected repeatedly, 10 or 8 times. However, it wasn't until 1937 that they formally divorced. Chaos for 16 years. However, Hardy continued to pursue his career. He portrayed the Tin Man in Larry Seaman's silent adaptation of The Wizard of Oz in 1925. This was not the popular musical rendition of the song. Seaman's real-life fiancée portrayed Dorothy in this comedy, black and white production. Hardy was a farmhand at first, and when they got to Oz, they changed into the Tin Man. Although there were differing opinions among critics, one magazine claimed it would make even the world's greatest grouch giggle. In retrospect, this movie demonstrated something significant. Hardy's movements, timing, and facial emotions. Everything was getting sharper. He was evolving into more than just a supporting antagonist. He collaborated with another comic, Bobby Ray, in the same year. Together, they produced 4 comedic shorts. At one, they caused a calamity by playing wallpaper hangers at a sanitarium in another hotel. These movies are unique because of how much they resemble Laurel and Hardy. Hardy, however, took the initiative and played the wise one without Laurel. Ray was the awkward companion. Something seemed strange, yet the roles were familiar. Ray simply lacked it, according to critics. There was no connection and he wasn't as funny. Like Laurel, I was the smart one. Hardy later acknowledged, "I'm also the fall guy, but just with Laurel." It tells it all. The recipe was nearly complete. All it needed was the right man at his side. Before most people recognized Oliver Hardy's name, he had already acted in almost 250 films. He was employed at Hal Roach Studios by 1924, where he portrayed minor but noteworthy parts in short comedies. He stood out even if he wasn't yet a celebrity. Stan Laurel, another comic, arrived to the studio at the same time. They simply happened to be present at the same moment. They weren't employed together. However, fate operates in an odd manner. In one of the short films, Stan was summoned to replace Hardy after he burnt his arm while preparing a leg of lamb in 1926. Something clicked as they came together on the screen. It simply worked. It wasn't planned or coerced. More people were laughing. There was instant chemistry. The studio made the decision to establish them as a legitimate squad in 1927. Putting pants on Philip was their first formal collaboration. It wasn't the modern-day Laurel and Hardy. Hardy was the stiff uncle who was attempting to coax Stan into pants in that movie, while Stan portrayed a crazy Scotsman in a kilt. It was brash, funny, and popular. Audiences enjoyed the difference as they demonstrated how successfully they played off one another, with one portraying the frustrated straight man and the other the idiot. They were soon ablaze. They created what is currently regarded as the largest pie fight in movie history in the Battle of the Century, which was released in 1927. There was a boxing bout at the beginning, and pies flying around the neighborhood at the conclusion. Stan has a toothache and ends up with laughing gas in the 1928 film Leave Them Laughing. The remainder of the movie is filled with mayhem, driving, collisions, police and laughter. There was more to these than comedy cartoons. They were well planned, well choreographed, and full of physical humor, things nobody else at that level was doing. Hardy also began to develop his persona around this period. He was not only the large man who stumbled, rather he was the arrogant man, who made an effort to maintain his dignity but ultimately failed. The tie twiddle, his trademark gesture, started to emerge. When he was humiliated, he would fumble with his tie. He would have an expression like, "Can you believe this?" as he looked directly into the camera. It was straightforward yet fantastic. It seemed as though he was speaking directly to the audience. Then the great change sound arrived. Talkies started displacing silent cinema stars one after another in 1929. Hardy, however, flourished. Like us, he was unfamiliar with his first sound picture with Stan. The humor about them finally conversing was even in the title. Hardy's southern accent, which he acquired from his Georgia upbringing, was a natural fit for his haughty on-screen persona. He talked clearly, deliberately, and with a false sense of seriousness that added humor to each sentence. The catchphrases also began at that time. Hardy groaned and said, "Why don't you do something to help me?" in that first sound movie. It became his favorite line. He later gave the now famous, "Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into," in Another Great Mess from 1930. In addition to reciting the words, he sold them with pauses, looks, and that frustrated voice that managed to remain kind even in rage. Next were the prizes. For the music box they took home the inaugural Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Comedy in 1932. The entire movie is about a piano being carried up a massive set of steps. That's it. But it was hilarious, because of the timing, the difficulty, and the anger. While shooting, they damaged 7 genuine pianos. Despite disagreements among critics, history supported their position. In Los Angeles, there is still a plaque on the steps from that movie. They were so well known by that point that short films were insufficient. With Pardon Us, a jail comedy that began as a 20-minute parody but evolved into a full-length film, they made their feature debut. It was a sloppy production. After negative screenings, it had to be re-edited, took more than a year, and entailed a dispute with MGM. However, they persisted. Spanish, French, German, and Italian are the 4 other languages in which it was filmed, phonologically reciting the lines without comprehending their meaning. No one else was acting in that manner. The roles behind the scenes were obvious. Laurel was the power source. Every joke he created, directed, edited, and obsessively watched. Hardy just arrived, performed flawlessly, and then went home to cook or play golf. It didn't bother him. Stan once said, "I think of all the funny stuff. I can play golf whenever I want." He was not slack. He was giving Stan the freedom to do what he did best. In exchange, he delivered faultless performances that made the concepts come to life. They produced 5 full-length films and 40 shorts between 1929 and 1935. It was a successful run, and throughout it all, Hardy was the one who remained still as everything around him crumbled, the calm amid the storm. Many people still consider Laurel and Hardy's 1933 release to be their finest. The setting of Sons of the Desert was not a desert and was unrelated to battles elsewhere. Rather, it concerned 2 spouses who were attempting to elude their wives in order to attend a lodge convention. Even the director and crew couldn't stop laughing while filming the movie because it was so amusing. Scenes have to be repeatedly reshot. One memorable incident had Mae Bush laughing uncontrollably and smashing a vase over Hardy's head. The scenario turned into a classic. The movie resonated even in the midst of the Great Depression. People needed a good chuckle, and this film provided it. Decades later, it was still broadcast on television, even as late as 2005 on Turner Classic Movies. It lasted because of the combination of brilliant gags, audacious performances, and impeccable timing. They produced Way Out West in 1937. 4 years later, Oliver Hardy sang, and he sang well, even though no one had anticipated him doing so. During The Trail of the Lonesome Pine, his baritone voice astounded listeners. It wasn't a new tune. Although it was published in 1913, Hardy's version is what most people remember. The performance was humorous and poignant, with Stan Laurel interjecting as a high-pitched counterpoint. Even though Hardy had studied music in his early years, this was one of the few occasions when he was able to perform. Fans now admire him more as a result. Hardy was in pain off-screen, but underneath all the laughter was a man with genuine talent. He separated from his 16-year wife, Myrtle Reeves, in 1937. Beginning in 1921, their marriage was characterized by heartbreak. Hardy did everything he could to support Myrtle, who battled despair and alcoholism. For her treatments, he paid more than $40,000, which is now more than $800,000. He repeatedly sent her to sanitariums in the hopes that she would get better, but to no avail. After a long day on set, Hardy would return home to mayhem, according to friends. However, he never allowed it to appear in his work. He provided some of his best performances to audiences even in those gloomy times. Hardy was sad but yet liberated when the divorce was completed in November. Meanwhile, a lovely thing was taking place in Britain. Laurel and Hardy were rising to international fame between 1935 and 1940. They added sound to their previously silent flicks. However, that didn't deter followers abroad. If anything, it deepened their affection for the pair. More than 5,000 admirers were waiting at the pier when they landed in Southampton in 1932 for their UK tour. Hours later, their gigs were sold out. It was referred to as Laurel and Hardy mania in British press. "We're just two fellows doing our best to make people laugh," Hardy said, charming the reporters. And they did. Despite having fewer cinemas, Sons of the Desert actually generated more money in the UK than in America. In Hollywood, where studio deals were becoming harder to come by, their notoriety helped them push back. They then produced The Flying Deuces in 1939. With a $375,000 budget, it was filmed in just 22 days. But it was not the movie that had a significant impact on Hardy's life. He met that person on the set. Virginia Lucille Jones was a script girl who was 29 years old. Hardy was 47. They clicked right away despite their different ages. In an attempt to spend more time with her, he began to add extra takes to sequences. They were married in Las Vegas on March 8, 1940. A few months later, his best man was Stan Laurel, Hardy's first genuine love, but his third marriage. The stability he had been lacking for years was provided by Virginia. They remained together until 1957, when he passed away. According to friends, no one else ever kept him grounded, composed and joyful as she did. Hardy had secrets, even during those quiet years. His hunger was one of them. He was lying when he said he didn't eat much. He had a huge favorite dish: a whole pot of coffee, a salad, lard-fried potatoes, and a 32-ounce steak. He ate the type of food that kept him going. Ideal for his part next to the slender Laurel, but there was a price for that size. Hardy suffered a heart attack in 1954. Physicians advised him to reduce weight quickly. He lost more than 150 pounds. Although it was never verified, others said it was due to cancer. In any case, fans were taken aback by the weight drop. The thing that stung the most, though, was how little money he and Laurel made from their films. He looked like a new guy. The names of studios like Fox and MGM brought in millions of dollars. Despite costing between $300,000 and $450,000 to produce, each film made a lot more money. Laurel and Hardy, however, did not get royalties. They were not seen as creators, but rather as workers. They weren't even permitted to make their own jokes or modify phrases at first. The studios only subsequently granted them greater autonomy, but the harm had already been done. They needed money by the 1950s. For this reason, in 1953 and 1954, they embarked on another tour. They wouldn't have had to if the studios had paid them adequately. They continued to provide, nevertheless. They were in their 50s, and did not serve on the front lines during World War II, but they tried their best to encourage the troops. They produced a short video for the U.S. Forest Service in 1942 titled "The Tree in a Test Tube." It had a message, but it was just 5 minutes long. For the military effort, Save Wood. In order to collect money for the troops, they and other celebrities embarked on a nationwide train journey known as the Hollywood Victory Caravan the same year. There were 14 cars on the train. It even had practice rooms and dancing floors. They visited First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt in Washington, D.C., where the journey came to a close. After that, they entertained a large audience. They continued to make 8 complete films while entertaining soldiers through the USO during the ensuing years. They were able to do both somehow. Oliver Hardy's latter years were characterized by waning fame, dashed hopes and conflicts he was unable to prevail in. Laurel and Hardy left Hal Roach Studios, where they became legendary, in 1941. They were mistaken to believe that they would advance by negotiating with major studios like Fox and MGM. They no longer had the flexibility to improvise. They were free to experiment, play and be themselves at Roach. They were forced to cope with subpar writing and strict scripts at the new studios. They started to lose the mystical spark. They gave up and silently stopped working on film around 1945. Not for long though. Then they paused in 1946. They went on a European tour in 1947. When Stan Laurel became unwell in 1948, he instructed Hardy to embark on solo work rather than lounge around doing nothing. Hardy and John Wayne collaborated on The Fighting Kentuckian at that point. He portrayed Willie Payne, Wayne's awkward sidekick. Wayne even offered Hardy a regular role as his comedy sidekick because of their intense chemistry. Hardy hesitated. He proceeded with Laurel's approval, but he didn't want viewers to believe that he and Laurel were done for good. Bunning Crosby followed. He landed Hardy a little part in Riding High in 1950. Although it didn't play a significant role, it demonstrated that Hardy could succeed without Laurel's assistance. They received an offer for a final major assignment the same year. The movie was a French-Italian production titled Atoll K. The $1.5 million was fantastic money, but everything else was a complete bust. 12 weeks were allotted for the shoot. A year passed. There were language issues everywhere. The director hardly spoke English, and neither Laurel nor Hardy could speak French. Laurel invited in other authors to revise the script because she didn't like it. The situation became so grave that it was necessary to covertly bring in another director. Hardy, meantime, became ill. He had the illness and his heart began to malfunction. The cameras continued to roll even though he was collapsing. His physique also started to transform. During filming, Hardy's weight increased from 250 to 330 pounds. It exacerbated his cardiac issues. He frequently claimed that he wasn't a big eater, even though he was known for enjoying food. Nevertheless, according to acquaintances, he ate 32-ounce lard-cooked steaks with coffee and potatoes on the side. Doctors advised him to lose weight after the movie. He moved too quickly. In a matter of weeks, he went from weighing over 300 pounds to only 150. He was severely debilitated by that crash diet. He suffered a heart attack in May 1954. The clock had begun to run out. He went on a last tour with Laurel later that year. They began their Birds of a Feather stage tour in Britain in October 1953. The numbers swelled, but initially only half the seats were occupied. Boat's theme tune was played throughout Ireland, accompanied by church bells and blue whistles. He and Hardy sobbed that day, according to Laurel. It was upsetting as well as lovely. Hardy's declining health was visible to Laurel. Their final performance together took place in Plymouth on May 17, 1954. According to one publication, Hardy was clearly having difficulties, yet he still had that charming eccentricity. They continued to dream, nevertheless. Their sole appearance on American television was on This Is Your Life in December 1954. It was meant to be the beginning of something fresh. There was a planned TV return. Laurel and Hardy's Fabulous Fables was a sitcom that NBC had huge ambitions for. Budgets were established and contracts were signed. Even a color photo spread was issued by TV Guide. But Stan Laurel suffered a stroke at the beginning of 1955. Hardy had a severe heart attack while he was recuperating. Then in September 1956, a stroke. He never got better. Their final appearance together was on the BBC program This Is Music Hall in 1955. Despite his fatigue, Hardy made an effort to grin. In 1956, he made his final appearance on camera in a silent home video shot at the home of Stan Laurel's daughter. He remained silent. He was unable to. He was bedridden and disabled following the stroke. Lucille, his wife, took care of him. Hardy would contact Stan when she was unhappy. The sight of Laurel brought him back to his composure. Their relationship remained strong in spite of everything. The world didn't remember this Oliver Hardy. A photograph that didn't include the cheerful round man who would fall from ladders and immediately get back up appeared in 1956. He appeared awfully skinny this time. He had shed about 100 pounds. His physique was weak, his face sunken, and the glimmer that had once brought millions of giggles was vanishing. He was little recognized. His health has been declining for years. The first was phlebitis, or leg discomfort. Blood clots, inflammation, thrombophlebitis and strokes followed one another. His strength was eroded by each. It was now too feeble to support the same physique that had earlier created comedic history. Hardy was unable to walk without a wheelchair by 1956. He was unable to clothe himself. The man who used to break the stillness with his laughter was incapable of doing the most basic activities. But something was still there. Even in those difficult last days, his charisma, his manners. He said, "I'd tip my hat to you, dear, if I could lift the damn thing," as one nurse recalled. Even when everything else was crumbling, Hardy managed to maintain a smile in his phrase, which was half jest and half reality. By August 1957, the situation deteriorated. Hardy experienced 2 more strokes. He became coma-ridden. He passed away from cerebral thrombosis on August 7, 1957. He was 65. Stan Laurel was unable to go to the funeral. He was too weak. He claimed Babe would understand. The entire globe was in mourning. Trail of the Lonesome Pine, one of their songs, peaked at number 2 on the UK charts in 1975, 18 years following Hardy's passing. His remains were interred in North Hollywood's Valhalla Memorial Park's Masonic Garden. However, Hardy's tale did not stop there. The Beatles included his picture next to Einstein and Monroe on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in 1967. In 1960, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Museums were constructed in Stan's in England and in his homeland in Georgia. Their last tour was chronicled in the 2018 movie Stan and Ollie. His Masonic heritage is still evident on his tombstone. Fans still stop by to express their gratitude.